Hey listeners, thanks for dropping in. I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa. And this is Buried Motives, where we dig deep into the details of some of the most gruesome
dirtbag murderers. Hey listeners.
Welcome back to Buried Motives.
We are super excited that you decided to join us today.
We are. Today we're going to talk about a very recent case, and one that deserves a trigger warning. This case is going to discuss severe domestic violence and sexual deviancy.
Oh man.
Yeah. This case is for Truth and Reconciliation Day. It caused huge controversy and really brings to light that the injustices faced by indigenous populations are still present today. They aren't something of the past, and they aren't just happening in remote northern communities. Winnipeg is the capital city of the province of Manitoba. In the beginning of the 1900s, Winnipeg was Canada's third largest city. It experienced a boom in the economy as people headed west, and its historic district still boasts many of its Victorian-era buildings with their ornate wooden trims and trappings. It is a beautiful part of the city. Not far away from these prominent and beautiful buildings, though, in South Douglas Point, there is a much darker culture. The Winnipeg Free Press said in 2020 that it was, quote, somewhere to lock the doors and drive through, avoiding contact with them.
With them? Just the residents of that area?
Yeah. The them that they were referring to was the populations of homeless and transient individuals that live there. Drugs and crime are rampant amongst the abandoned warehouses in that area. In 2022, over 1,000 homeless people were surveyed in just one day in an attempt to capture the gravity of the problem. It captured just a small portion of the homeless in a city of well under 1 million people. Whenever I hear these facts, I am always just floored. We're not talking about a sunny destination. In the winter, Winnipeg temperatures reach, on average, between minus 15 and minus 20 Celsius. And it's not uncommon to see temperatures dip below minus 45.
Oh, that's freeze your face off cold.
Yeah, this isn't a climate that you want to live outside in.
No.
And yet they have this huge homeless population. The indigenous populations, those of the First Nation and the Métis, were significantly overrepresented among this population. It's not a big surprise that the life expectancy in this area is much lower than other parts of the city, given the poverty and the lifestyles that are attracted to this area. The dense concentration of shelters and homelessness also bring other populations. Those that prey on the vulnerable, drug dealers, human traffickers, and sexual predators. Sadly, Winnipeg has one of the highest number of missing persons reported in Canada. In 2022, more than 9,300 people were reported missing in the city, and the murder rate is the second highest in the country.
Really?
Yes, it's triple that of Toronto and Vancouver, which are much bigger cities.
Yeah, that is wild. I had no idea.
Yeah, things are not good in Winnipeg.
Melissa's been, I've not.
There are some really, really beautiful areas, but there are definitely some areas that you don't want to travel through.
Which is so sad because for some people, that's their community that they're living in.
Mm-hmm. It's just a culture that exists there, unfortunately. So on May 16th, 2022, when partial human remains were found in a dumpster between Henderson Highway and RB Bay, it wasn't an unheard of scenario, unfortunately. While searching the dumpster at 253 Edison Avenue around 5:20 that morning, John Kinnell found more than scrap metal that he had been looking for. Inside a Dollarama bag was a severed head of a young woman.
In a Dollarama bag.
Mm-hmm.
I just cannot even imagine the poor people everywhere that find dead bodies or pieces of bodies.
It would be so gruesome.
It would.
And it's a visual that would not leave you.
No, that would shake you to your core.
Mm-hmm. This poor woman would later be identified by her fingerprints as 24-year-old Rebecca Stacy Contois. Rebecca was a member of the Ochai-Chak-Ko-Sipia First Nation, or Crane River. She was the mother of one and had been living on the streets in Winnipeg, staying in shelters. Knowing that the garbage truck was soon going to be doing its pickup, John took the bag out of the bin and put it into the window well of an apartment building while he placed the call to police at 5:24 a.m., which I thought was so smart.
It really was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I would have thought of that. And that took a lot of bravery for him to pick up that bag and move it.
Yes. I don't think I would have the forethought to do that. I think I would be so caught up in, I need to call the police, that I wouldn't be thinking, oh, the garbage truck is coming around the corner.
Yeah. It really shows a lot of respect for her.
Yeah, it does. Police arrived at the scene not long after and took statements from John and started searching other bins based on the facts they learned from him about finding other women's belongings in other bins. Other black garbage bags were found containing Rebecca's extremities in the garbage bins just a short distance away at 215 Edison Ave, and several other recently emptied bins had blood in them.
Oh my goodness. So it was really good that he had taken that out.
Yeah, because some of them had been emptied before the police got to them.
Wow.
Because the woman's body was in the early stages of decomposition, police believe that she had probably been recently dumped there by someone that lived close by. So they started canvassing the area for witnesses. Several people pointed at a man that lived in the nearby North Kildonan apartment, located at 259 McKay Ave. The man was Jeremy Skibicki. On May 17th, a gentleman that lived in the nearby apartment building said that around 2 a.m. on the day before, he had heard his neighbor Jeremy running up and down the stairs of the apartment building, causing a lot of noise. He confronted him while Jeremy was carrying waste baskets, and he was told by Jeremy that he was just taking out the trash. The neighbor had complained that Jeremy continued to make a lot of noise, even after he'd asked him to stop, and even after he put in a complaint to the landlord of the building. He said he just didn't stop going up and down the stairs.
Taking her out in pieces?
Video surveillance from the area would later confirm that Jeremy had been carrying several items to different dumpsters that night.
Oh my goodness.
He was taken into custody that day, May 17th, and at 5:53, police started to interrogate him about the items that he had been throwing out the night before.
Good thing he wasn't smart enough to be quiet.
Yeah, really. That's what made it so easy for the police to track him down.
Yeah, thank goodness.
For the next 22 hours, he was questioned by police. While being questioned, Jeremy remained relatively calm and relaxed as police questioned him about his actions. During the first 2/3 of the interview, he tells them all about his childhood and even fills them in on his exercise routine.
What?
Yeah, he's acting like he's all buddy-buddy with them. Then the tone changes a little bit as the police start to lay out the evidence that they have against him. Jeremy looks at the interrogating officer and says, quote, "At this point, I want to express that you've done a very good job. You guys are obviously not stupid." And then, when he is done trying to stroke their egos, he tells them what a joke the criminal justice system is, and that he did kill Rebecca because, quote, "I really just wanted to see how far, I could take things because the criminal justice system is a joke."
What?
Yeah. He goes on to say, "The world that we're living in is sick. I was driven to do stuff like this because I was so spent emotionally." I don't think that this was a response that police were expecting during this murder investigation.
Yeah, that is maddening to hear him talk about her death like that.
Yeah, it's just so nonchalant and he doesn't really hide it. He's like, "Yep, I did murder her. You guys are right. You're so smart.
But you guys are so crappy that I thought I would murder someone and see how far I could get with getting away with it."
It would have been shocking to hear.
What a dirtbag.
Yeah. And what came next was definitely not what the police were expecting. Jeremy drops a bombshell, one that nobody was anticipating. Police were certain that they had enough evidence against him for the murder of Rebecca that they were already confident enough to be arresting him. He wasn't just brought in for questioning, he was already arrested. That confidence came even before they had executed a search warrant on his apartment. That search wouldn't be done until the next day. So they thought that they were closing up this case, but they had no idea about what this neat and cleanly shaven dirtbag was going to confess next.
There was more.
Yeah, he coldly and calmly tells them without remorse, "I killed 4 people."
No way. Your blood would run cold.
Could you imagine?
No.
Jeremy Skibicki is a dirtbag through and through. He chose to purposely prey on the most vulnerable in society, all in the name of furthering the white race.
No.
Yeah, well, at least that's what he claims as the main motivator of his actions, because he's too disgusting of a dirtbag to admit his real motives for killing people.
Oh.
Yeah.
What's worse than that?
Oh, just wait. Jeremy claims that he was born to a woman who originally was from Newfoundland and named him Anton at birth. As an infant, he was surrendered by his mother and was adopted by a Polish family. His mother went on to have other children, but never returned for him. And I think this rejection played a lot into some childhood trauma that he talks about.
that he was viewing as a rejection, not my mom couldn't take care of me and tried to give me a better life.
Right. Raised as Jeremy Anthony Michael Skibicki, his family lived in Winnipeg. Not much is known about his very early years with his adoptive family, but some of his statements made as an adult indicate that he was physically and sexually abused and he felt powerless as a child. It is evident from his adult behavior that he had an extensive knowledge of Bible scripture and that he had an appreciation for classical music and played the violin.
Oh my. So was he sexually abused by his adoptive parents?
I don't know. He never comes out and says actually who did that, just that it happened to him.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But then he's also a lying dirtbag.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So take it with a grain of salt.
That's right. I did feel like his adult personality and his tales about his childhood painted a very interesting portrait. To have somebody that had been taught violin and then claimed to have been neglected.
Right. That's not a cheap hobby.
No.
And if you don't care about your kid, you're not going to get them violin lessons.
Right. It was an interesting contrast for me. Classmates of Jeremy's would say that from a young age, he was intimidated by boys around him. But when surrounded by girls, he would take on a domineering and sometimes violent role very quickly.
Oh.
In high school, Jeremy attended Argyle Alternative High School, a school that offers different and more flexible learning schedules and teaching styles to help students meet their educational needs. It didn't sound like he had any specific learning disability, but that his situation required some extra help. During his high school years, boys would describe him as timid and mousy, while girls would describe him as being aggressive.
Wow, what a contrast.
Mm-hmm.
So was he taking his aggression from the boys out on the girls?
It's possible.
Because we know a lot of bullies are being bullied as well.
That's true. And it could have been that. He was a very tall teen, but his hair had turned gray during his high school years.
Oh, wow.
So maybe he was bullied. One childhood friend that was a little bit closer to Jeremy did say that as a young child, he had just been like everybody else, who enjoyed playing online video games, playing guitar, and he liked cooking. But nearing the end of high school, things started to really change for him. And that's when there was this dramatic change in his personality.
And do you think he targeted girls because he had resentment towards his birth mother?
It could be. But I think that as his sexual appetites increased, I think he became more aggressive towards women because he was trying to fulfill his sexual needs.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that had more to do with it. But he does say several times during his confession that it's because of his sexual abuse why he treats women the way he does, because he likes the power over them.
Okay.
He's very self-reflective.
Yeah. Just a gross guy.
Mm-hmm. With this personality change that his friend described, his social media accounts became more and more disturbing as he posted many messages about white supremacy. He made numerous posts about religion and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and made no attempt to hide his disdain for different ethnic groups, anyone that he considered not white.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, he's a real winner for sure. Jeremy would later claim that it was during this time that he was diagnosed with PTSD and borderline personality disorder, but no official diagnoses were ever made according to his medical records. But he would tell people this. There are numerous times during his teen and adult life when Jeremy is taken into hospital for erratic and belligerent behavior, but each time he is released without further assessment. Because once the drugs and alcohol wore off, he returned to a calmer state and was no longer deemed a threat. Not once was he referred for further evaluation. And I thought this could have been because of an overloaded and flawed system that just put him back out on the streets when stabilized. Or it could reflect that he was just not deemed to have any mental illnesses that required any further evaluation. I was trying to keep an open mind.
Oh, that is interesting because I could see either being true.
Right. At the same time as these personality changes were occurring, his alcohol and drug use was increasing and he was developing some very disturbing sexual urges. Jeremy admits from his early teens that he got aroused with the idea of having sex with incapacitated women. He claims that it was his way to feel powerful over them, and he related it back to the abuse he had received as a child.
Well, we do know that sexual assault is most often because of wanting power.
Right. He really got off on having sex with women who were intoxicated or unconscious.
Ugh.
Women that couldn't defend themselves against him. These fantasies would continue to grow and involve forays into the dark web to view pornography that portrayed women being restrained and choked or suffocated. and this was clearly demonstrated in his numerous relationships. Jeremy, it seems, did not have too much trouble attracting the ladies. He was on the outside quiet-spoken with a deep voice and could present as being a very kind individual. These charming skills he used to lure women in. Isn't that scary?
It really is.
Yeah.
Because they're thinking, oh, he's just the quiet, sweet guy, where he's actually a raging monster.
Right. It gave me Dahmer vibes.
Ooh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. By his mid-20s, Jeremy had already been in several abusive relationships and had at least one child that he did not have anything to do with, a little girl that was born in 2010. I did track down several of the women's and children's names, but because most of the names were redacted in court documents, I have chosen to follow suit. As few people as possible need to be connected with this dirtbag.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. With each relationship, Jeremy becomes more and more violent and erratic. The violence would lead to some of his arrests and charges. In 2015, he threatened his pregnant fiancée, holding a knife to her belly and telling her that he would kill their unborn child during the altercation.
What?
Yes. This wasn't his first offense. He had been charged previously, a few years earlier in 2008, but his forgery charges at that time seemed pretty petty in comparison to the death threats of his own child.
How awful.
Yeah, he was sentenced to only 2 years probation for the threats and ordered to stay away from his former partner.
Probation.
Yeah, probation.
When murder is the number one cause of death for a pregnant woman.
Yep.
Oh, that just burns my butt.
Yeah.
Probation, not even any jail time. I don't think men who abuse women realize just what cowards they are. You're going to pick on someone, especially a pregnant woman who is so vulnerable, and that makes you feel like a tough guy?
Well, vulnerable is who he preys on, purposely.
Right, but to me it just shows what a little spineless slug they are.
Oh, he is completely that.
Yeah, because he's not going to the gym and picking on big muscle-bound men. No, he's going to pick on a vulnerable, pregnant woman. You coward.
Yeah, it's really awful.
It's disgusting. Sorry, I'm riled. You don't do that to a pregnant woman. I just feel so bad for her.
And just being ordered to stay away from his fiancée, that never works.
No, a piece of paper is not going to stop someone from coming after you.
No. Jeremy went back to his fiancée with apologies, and she actually took him back.
Oh.
During their reunion, he forced her to take sleeping pills by telling her that if she didn't take them, he would take his own life.
Good. Let him. And that's just such another form of manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
It's emotional abuse.
Yeah, it wasn't just physical and sexual abuse that he was putting these women through. When she complied and was passed out, he raped her. When she came to, she fled and had a protection order filed against him. In her application, she had written, quote, "He won't stop until I'm dead." Her application was dismissed.
No way.
Yeah, unfortunately it happens. She fled from him without protection. Jeremy, now single again, became intermittently homeless and in 2017 spent a lot of his time in downtown Winnipeg, in the North End, and at South Point Douglas. He doesn't appear to have ever held down any job for very long. Instead, he sustained himself on social assistance and panhandling. By 2018, he had secured a place of his own in the west end of town, but would still commute 25 minutes by bus to hang out at the shelters on the other side of town.
Really?
Yeah. Jeremy frequently visited a shelter and a community hub called Nadinawamak, or a relative's place. It was in South Point Douglas. He would also visit Siloam Mission, a Christian non-profit shelter on Princess Street, for hot meals. While at these shelters, he would approach women there and offer them a place to have a hot shower or a place where drugs would be supplied. Whatever was their fancy. He was just a nice guy like that, Christy.
He's a predator, laying out bait.
He is absolutely a predator. On at least one occasion, security had to step in as Jeremy got a little too insistent that one of the women come home with him. Police were called to the shelter. When they arrived, Jeremy made a big deal about being a white supremacist and started acting really bizarrely, and he was asked to leave. Bizarre behavior is not an uncommon thing to witness at a shelter, and so a lot of it was just brushed aside.
Thinking, oh, maybe he's high on drugs. He's just freaking out. Let's just get rid of him.
Right. It was just such a common thing that they saw, and so it wasn't worth their time. That was the excuse used by a shelter employee at our relative's place later in 2022, when Jeremy had told the employee that he just used shelters to, quote, stalk his victims. He just chalked it up to Jeremy having a mental illness. Hearing unusual things at a shelter is not that unusual.
That's true, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. So he just thought, oh, this guy's off his meds. He's saying weird and wonky things.
Because on the inside, you don't really want to believe that someone is actually hurting people.
Right. You wouldn't really expect somebody in their right mind to be telling you they were only visiting homeless shelters to pick up victims to murder.
Right. Because if you were doing that, you're not going to tell anybody, typically.
That's right. But he was just telling people.
Just shows how emboldened he felt.
Mm-hmm. This is exactly how Jeremy would meet his future wife. Yes, this dirtbag actually got somebody to marry him.
Ugh.
Yeah. A Métis woman, Erin, was down on her luck and struggling with drug addictions when she met Jeremy at Siloam Mission in February of 2018. She had just been released from prison. She was addicted to meth and had no place to stay.
So she's a Métis woman, and he's claiming to be a white supremacist.
Yes.
That's a little contradictory.
It is. He purposely chooses them, though, because he feels that they're subservient.
Easier victims.
Yes, they're vulnerable.
Ugh.
Which is just so sad.
It is sad because unfortunately that is true in our country.
It is.
And that could be why his pregnant girlfriend before wasn't given the help that she needed.
Why her protection order was denied.
Right.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that think that.
I'm not saying for sure, but it's plausible. Just with the history of what has happened in our country.
Right. It's a little fishy.
Yeah.
So Erin had went to this shelter, but at the time it was full. So she was actually waiting in line for a bed to open up. Jeremy invited her back to his place, and she thought he was sweet and charming. She didn't know at the time that he had given her a false name. He had introduced himself as David. Once at his house, Erin learned that she had been tricked. Not only was his name fake, but so was his sweet attitude. Over the course of their relationship, he would often display strange behavior and became increasingly violent. Erin came up with her own nicknames for Jeremy, depending on his erratic moods. When he became Scary Jerry, she tried to avoid him.
So did she stay with him because she was just so desperate for a place to stay?
She did, because she was vulnerable and she didn't feel like she had any other alternative.
Because at least she had a warm bed to sleep in.
Right. It is so sad when somebody believes that an abusive life is the only life possible for them. It just breaks my heart.
It does. It's awful.
That you're just that hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
That this is just okay to be treated this way.
That it's like a price you have to pay.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy's rages were interspersed with moments of kindness and sweet gestures. In July, while at a pharmacy, out of the blue, he had announced, quote, "Can I have everybody's attention, please?" After reassuring the crowd that he wasn't going to rob the place, he got down on one knee and proposed to Erin.
At a pharmacy?
Yes. She was put on the spot. And despite her reservations, Erin said yes. She was desperate for companionship, and she admits that the two had developed a toxic codependency that was fueled by their meth addictions.
Ooh.
Yeah. It was not a good situation. When the two were married in September, they were high at the time. Her family, understandably, was not happy. In response, Jeremy started making threatening phone calls to Erin's mom. These threats were reported to the police, but nothing ever resulted from them. During his short marriage with Erin, his white supremacist views grew. On Facebook, he posted Holocaust denials as well as pictures of himself with an Iron Cross, the German military medal that became the Nazi symbol in the 1930s.
Ew.
Yeah. He claimed to be an official member of the Holy Europe, a subset of the far-right movement known as the Alliance of the Patriotic Parallel Movements of European Folks, which calls for the re-Christianization of Europe and its former colonies. Other posts denied the existence of the graves at residential schools in Canada and insisted that residential school survivor stories were government fabrications.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is just wicked.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost shocking that someone can post those kinds of things and just get away with it.
It is shocking. But his behavior was bizarre. One time, when they had a friend living with them, one night Jeremy just burst into the apartment and demanded that his friend have sex with Erin in front of him.
What?
Yes. It was just bizarre behavior.
So did they?
No, they laughed. They're like, no, that's not going to happen.
Ow.
Mm-hmm. And it's hard to know if this was just kind of drug-led behavior or was he really mentally unstable?
It's both, Melissa.
Yeah. The drugs are pushing the mentally unstable and the mentally unstable is pushing the drugs.
I think so.
It's a sad cycle. Just like in his previous relationships, Erin says that Jeremy repeatedly raped and sodomized her while she slept. that he would actually become visibly excited when she took sleeping pills to sleep, and that she would wake up bruised, bleeding, and sore the next morning to the evidence of what he had done to her while she was asleep.
Oh my gosh. So for him, it was a free-for-all, like not even treating her body with respect.
Yeah. Eventually, he started forcing her to take the sleeping medication that she had been prescribed for PTSD.
Wow. The only saving grace is that she slept through those attacks then, but she would wake up with the aftermath.
And know that it happened and still not have a full recollection of what had happened.
Yeah, that's terrible in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. At other times, he would ask her to act lifeless during sex to heighten his arousal. Erin said Jeremy told her that he had, quote, sleeping beauty fetish.
Why didn't he just get a blow-up doll?
I don't know.
He didn't want a participating partner.
No, not at all. When Erin protested, Jeremy would tell her it was her duty and use passages in the Bible to justify his treatment of her.
Oh, get out.
Yep, saying that women were made to be subservient to men. At times, he would make her stay naked for days and spit on her to prove his dominance.
I have no words. None that I can say on air.
He's disgusting.
Yep.
I have no problems calling this guy a dirtbag.
None.
When Erin wouldn't comply to his requests that she act like a rag doll during sex, he would hold a pillow over her face until she passed out.
My gosh.
Jeremy threatened her that if she ever tried to leave, he would kill her and keep her body in a closet to have sex with it until she, quote, stunk too bad.
Melissa, this is awful.
It is. This brave young woman fled this abusive relationship in September of 2019 after attending an addiction recovery program. She applied for a protection order. In it, Erin told the courts that she believed that Jeremy had narcissistic traits and that he was like 3 different people, and that she thought he was schizophrenic based on some of the things that she had read online. She shared with the court several Facebook posts that Jeremy had made saying he could kick somebody's teeth out in the name of Jesus Christ, that he was not schizophrenic, and that he, quote, can't leave everything up to God, and that all murders in the Bible were justified.
Wow.
So she outlines all of these things that are so disturbing about his behavior.
Right.
And fortunately, she was granted the protection order. Unfortunately, it didn't stop Jeremy from still trying to contact her, though. He actually legally tried to have the order overturned.
What?
Mm-hmm. He was denied. I am sure that the judge was not impressed by his honesty during this legal proceeding when Jeremy told him how he treated Erin, that he, quote, basically held her hostage and raped her.
My gosh. So he wasn't even embarrassed to admit that he viewed her as his property.
Oh, not at all. He felt totally justified.
That is really warped. Mm-hmm. I am really wondering if there was some kind of mental health concerns going on here.
We're going to get into that when the trial comes.
Okay.
It's a very lengthy discussion. But could you imagine this judge listening to this guy saying, I think you need to overturn the protection order because I just hold her hostage. I just rape her.
Like, why didn't he just throw him right in jail then?
I don't know, but he didn't.
Because he's admitting to these crimes to a judge.
Yep.
Like, thank you, sir. Bailiff, get him. Lock him up. Throw away the key.
No. Instead, they let the protection order stand. Erin admits that the two would remain Facebook friends and continue to chat because the relationship was one of the only sources of love that she had ever felt.
Oh, that's sad.
It is so sad to me. And this vulnerability led them to getting back together on different occasions.
No way.
Yeah. During one of these occasions in February of 2021, Jeremy hit Erin in the forehead so hard he gave her a concussion. She pressed charges, but they were stayed because the judge determined that her memory of the event was unreliable.
What?
Yeah.
Because of her injury.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, honey, that injury was so bad that you can't remember it, so I can't take your word for it.
Yes.
That's terrible.
It is really, really terrible.
Shame on that judge. Whoever you are, if you're listening, shame on you.
It's just so bizarre to me. But there are advocates of indigenous women that say this is not uncommon.
Ugh.
It's sad.
It is.
In December of that year, Jeremy was found not guilty of breaching his previous no contact order with Erin. And I don't know about you, but a smash to the forehead sounds like he made contact to me.
Yeah, that's vicious, violent contact. That's not showing up at your house with flowers.
Yeah. I think there was something about how she had consented to them getting back together. But she didn't consent to being abused.
No, and it doesn't erase all the things that he's done in the past.
No. During this time, Jeremy had found himself a new apartment. in October of 2021 in the neighborhood of North Kildonan, the same apartment where he was arrested for Rebecca's murder. Over the course of the 22-hour interview on May 18th, 2022, sitting relaxed, lounged back against the wall, Jeremy tells the Winnipeg homicide detectives, unprompted, all about the 4 murders he has committed. Around the 15th of March, Jeremy tells police that he met a woman outside the Salvation Army. He couldn't remember the exact date or the woman's name. He just remembered that it was sometime around when the COVID restrictions had ended. He invited the woman to his apartment. Jeremy said at that time he was coming off of some mushrooms and that they pushed his, quote, psychological thought process into reality. He said that the thought of drowning her in the bathtub had entered his mind as they hung around smoking. He said that after they had hung out for a bit, she had left to get some cigarettes, and when she returned, Jeremy said he was still coming down from his high. He would say that his decision to follow through with killing this woman, later named Buffalo Woman by the media, was triggered by her trying to steal from him and telling him, "I love you, Daddy." That made him just snap, and he started to strangle her. As Buffalo Woman's body became limp, his sexual desires were triggered, and he began to undress her and drag her body to the bathtub.
Oh, no.
Yeah. This poor woman regained consciousness as he was doing this, so he held her under the water and drowned her. Then this disgusting, vile man defiled her further by raping her lifeless body.
What a pig.
Yeah. When he was done, he wrapped her in a contractor's bag and put her body into a garbage bin using, quote, all of his strength and rolled it down the street to the Tony's Academic Auto Service. He tossed Buffalo Woman's belongings into the trash as well, except for her baby fat jacket. That he decided to sell on Facebook Marketplace.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's terrible.
Ah.
The poor person who bought it having no idea.
Wouldn't that be gross? They find out.
Oh, that is disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
That you've been wearing a dead woman's jacket who was murdered.
Yeah. The second woman he tells the police about is named Morgan. He met her at Silo and Mission in 2012. He noticed the woman again outside the shelter on May 1st, 2022. And he told police that it looked like she had been barred from the shelter. So he hopped on the local bus behind her and offered her a place to stay. Morgan Beatrice Harris, a member of the Long Plains First Nation, had been homeless for nearly a decade. She had 5 children and still remained in contact with them. At the time that she met Jeremy the second time, she was in a cycle of addiction treatment programs and shelters. She was trying to turn her life around. Jeremy nonchalantly told police that he had filled the bathtub when he got back to his place and how he consciously let Morgan leave to have her last smoke outside.
Like he was doing her a favor.
Yeah. When he talked about his first murder, it seemed like he was a little bit surprised by what he had done. It was like a spur of the moment thing, giving into these dark thoughts that he had been having with the aid of the mushrooms. That's what it came across as he's telling police about it. But this does not seem to be the case with this murder.
No, this sounds premeditated.
Mm-hmm. He does say that he was using meth at the time of this murder, but he tells them that he is, quote, not blaming the drugs, that he, quote, knew what he was doing.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. When Morgan returned to the apartment, he had turned off the lights and he had attempted to push her into the bathtub. His size made it possible for him to subdue her by placing her in a headlock. He dragged her to the bathroom, where in her struggle, she hit her head on the bathtub.
Ugh.
She continued to fight, but Jeremy actually shrugs and tells the police, quote, it didn't work out for her.
Oh.
He drowned her as well. Afterwards, he cleaned her up and moved her to the bed where he had sex with her numerous times until the smell was, quote, too much.
So he kept her there for a while.
Mm-hmm. Then he disposed of her as he had done with Buffalo Woman. He placed her body in a commercial garbage bin located at the Midas Muffler steps away from the Tony's bin where he had placed Buffalo Woman. His third victim, he couldn't remember the name of. She was only able to be identified later as Marcedes Myran from her clothing that Jeremy had described. Her belongings and DNA were also found in Jeremy's apartment. Marcedes, 26 at the time, had ended up on the streets after losing her children into foster care. She was also a member of the Long Plains First Nations. Jeremy said that he met her in the back lane between the Salvation Army and the Siloam Mission shelters. He offered her a place to stay, asking her, quote, do you have a place? Do you want to come? You know, come with me?
Ew.
Yeah. He said originally that it was just a nice offer, but he had come to believe that she was taking advantage of him as she stayed with him, and that made him feel helpless and powerless. This triggered him in his interactions with her, and he began to have thoughts about killing her.
Even though he extended the invite and she just accepted.
Right.
Where he would have been offended if she said no.
Mm-hmm.
Because then how dare she?
Yeah.
Really, there was no way out of this for her.
No. That night, when they were having what he claims was consensual sex, he became a little rough for her, and she started to refuse him and fight back. The fighting back, he tells police, was the ultimate trigger, and that it made his, quote, passive thoughts become, quote, something else.
Ugh.
Again, he says that while he had been using meth, that he was consciously aware that if she fled, she might become a liability because he had already killed 2 people. He strangled her twice. Jeremy explained to the police that he was going to put Marcedes in a headlock, but instead strangled her from the front because he, quote, couldn't get his arms around her. He wrestled her to the ground and sat on top of her, strangling her from the front until she was, quote, like skull and crossbones dead.
What a jerk. That's not funny.
No, I can't even explain to you how nonchalant and proud of himself he is as he's describing these things to the police.
Yeah, it's almost like he's trying to brag to the cool kids at school.
Mm-hmm.
Look what I did.
Yeah. After the period of necrophilia, he made the decision to dismember her body with a combat knife because he felt he wouldn't be able to move her body all in one piece. He placed her body in multiple garbage bags and Dollarama bags. It took him 12 hours, he said. Afterwards, he cleaned up with pine sol to cover the smell. He couldn't remember which bin he had put her body in, and he told police that he thought it was around the 1st of May. He admitted that Marcedes' death did cause him a little bit of regret because she was more mentally stable than the other girls.
Which means he's rating the value of their lives in his own sick mind.
Yeah, he does that throughout because he feels like he's acting for God.
Yeah, right. That's an excuse afterwards. I don't believe that for a second.
No, I think it's all about him getting off, and then he's coming up with excuses why afterwards to justify it.
Totally.
Yeah. As he describes 24-year-old Rebecca's murder, the only one that police had suspected him of, he says that, quote, I was very overconfident by the last time because I was sure I would get away with it. He tells police that he didn't follow his own rules for making sure no one could connect him with her. Jeremy openly tells police proudly that he had a general criteria for selecting his victims, including no video of the victim entering or exiting his apartment, that they not have a phone or log into social media, and that no one knew that they were with him. When one of the officers asks him what would happen if the individual had a cell phone, Jeremy just tells them, oh, they wouldn't be a target then.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, all you ladies out there addicted to your cell phones, you don't have to feel bad about it now.
No, that's what saved a lot of them.
That's wild, honestly.
And he's so calculated.
Yeah.
He knows exactly what he's doing. Jeremy admits that he had broken all of these rules with Rebecca. He and Rebecca were friends on Facebook, and a picture of Rebecca had been uploaded to his computer. He'd even tried to get her added to his lease. He had met Rebecca on the bus about 4 months prior to his arrest, and she would stay with him on and off for a couple of days at a time. Over the course of their interactions, he again began to feel used by her and feel that Rebecca had been only telling him she loved him to get a free place to stay. He tells detectives that her deceit was, quote, probably one of the reasons I did what I did.
Probably.
Yeah. Again, he's just coming up with excuses for what he actually wants.
Right. But I think he really feels justified.
Oh, he 100% feels justified.
Which makes him so dangerous.
Yeah. Rebecca returned to his apartment on May 15th, and while she was sleeping, Jeremy says he tried to have intercourse with her, and she tried to fight off his advances. She had rejected him numerous times before, so he decided to, quote, fill up the tub again, and then get high. After filling the tub, he strangled Rebecca, but says that he was unable to get her into the tub because of her weight. So instead, he had to use a washcloth to clean her body off so that he could, quote, do whatever with her. Like the other victims, Jeremy raped Rebecca's body, he says, quote, 7 or more times over approximately 12 hours, and then dismembered her body, placing it in bags that would later be found in the bins behind the apartment building.
Wow.
He lets police know how smart he is by choosing times early in the morning before anyone would be up, saying, quote, the thing all of these things have in common is around the time that they took place, because I felt like if it was any later than that, it was between 5 and 6, something like that. There was daylight out, but it was before anyone was really awake. Because I felt like if I hadn't taken the opportunity there, it would have been too late, basically. The detective then asks, the opportunity to do what? And Jeremy says, to kill her without anyone noticing.
So he would keep the body longer or get rid of it earlier just to make that time frame.
That's right.
Okay.
So that he was getting rid of it when nobody was around. As the interview wraps up, I can only imagine what the police were feeling. This is 3 more bodies than they were expecting. They probably thought that they were coming to the end of this case, and instead they were just getting started on 3 others. Police now had to go back and try to find the evidence to corroborate Jeremy's confession. It might seem that if someone's confessing to murder without being prompted to do so, that you should just believe them. But that isn't the case. There are some dirtbags that will just confess to gain notoriety. And Jeremy, in his calm and relaxed manner, definitely fit the type that was bragging and seeking attention. On the day that he was arrested, only 1 day after Rebecca had been found, he sent a picture to another woman. The picture was of himself shirtless with what appeared to be blood-stained hands.
No way.
Yeah. So he definitely was not above seeking attention.
No woman wants to see that, Jeremy. That's not going to turn anyone on.
Well, it might intimidate them, though.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. So police did their due diligence. Using the information that Jeremy had provided as a starting point, police go over 2,000 hours of video surveillance, Facebook messages, internet searches, to tighten up the timelines of when the women were killed and who they are. They would find that Jeremy would frequently search for information on garbage truck pickup schedules and cleaning up advice. It was his search for, quote, how long does it take for hot water to come back on, that told police that it was between May 1st and May 2nd that he killed 39-year-old Morgan Harris. On May 3rd, he was caught on video lifting something with a black covering into a dumpster behind the Midas. So that's how they figured out her exact timeline.
Good.
After Marcedes was murdered, Jeremy had searched up the definition of a serial killer and made a comment to Erin on May 6th that he could be going to prison for 3 life sentences. She contacted him after he had sent her a photo because she had a feeling that something terrible had happened. Over the next several days, Jeremy told Erin that he could not admit to what he had done because he would then have to go on the run. He made several comments about having a direct line to God, and at the same time, he was claiming that he had been tricked by Satan into thinking that it was God's plan to cheat on her in the past.
Get your lies straight, buddy.
Yeah. He continued to try to justify his raping her by telling her it was because, quote, it's a sex power thing, but it's okay since you are my wife.
No, it's not.
When she called him out on needing help for his mental health, he became very upset. A couple of days later, he told her he would confess to whatever he had done on his deathbed. This all tells me clearly he knew what he was doing was wrong.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. If you know I can't say anything or I'm going to have to go on the run or I'm going to spend the rest of my life in jail, you know it was wrong.
Exactly. It is interesting that several times during his confession, he mentions getting a priest for a confession. Again, he knows what he's doing is wrong. He needs to confess it.
Right.
If you're being told to do something by God, you don't really need to confess it because it's not wrong.
Right. You're being obedient to God then.
Mm-hmm.
But he knows deep down that he wasn't if he's saying, oh, I need to give a confession so that I can be forgiven of my lousy sins.
Yeah. Police also used women's belongings and DNA found in Jeremy's apartment to confirm his story and women's identities.
So did he keep items as tokens?
Yeah. He had kept small souvenirs from each woman, except Buffalo Woman. To date, she hasn't been identified. The only thing that's really known about her is they believe she was in her 20s when she met Jeremy.
Oh, that is so sad.
It is so sad. From the other women, he kept Morgan's ring, Marcedes' necklaces and bracelets, and he was still wearing Rebecca's watch when he was arrested.
No way.
Yes. I wasn't kidding you when they said they knew that he was guilty for her murder right away.
Wow.
During the investigation, police found other DNA sources in his one-bedroom apartment. In total, they confirmed 16 different female profiles. Besides the 4 victims that Jeremy had confessed to, only 3 have been identified. Of those 3, none are expected to have been murdered by Jeremy. 9, though, are still unaccounted for. This just highlights to me what a vulnerable population he was exploiting. Not only were all these women indigenous, but they were all homeless, so it makes them so much harder to find. One poor father, whose daughter was last seen in Winnipeg in March of 2022, traveled all the way from northern Manitoba to give a sample of DNA from his daughter's belongings to find out if she was Buffalo Woman. Police had tracked down the coat sold on Facebook Marketplace that Jeremy said belonged to the poor woman, and they had extracted female DNA from the cuffs and collar to get a potential DNA profile for her.
Wow.
It wasn't a match for this man's daughter, but his daughter was a match for other DNA found in Jeremy's apartment.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So he knew that his daughter had come into contact with this creep, but had no idea if she survived it.
That's right. Ashley Shingoose is still missing to this day. They have no idea where she is. Police are still working on identifying other DNA profiles and comparing them to missing women that they believe have come into contact with Jeremy. But he was so good about making sure that people didn't see him with these women.
Right. But this is still a very recent case. So if anybody has any information, they need to come forward.
Oh, absolutely. Because during a review of his internet usage, there were other days that he had looked up the garbage truck schedules, just like he had did the mornings of each of his 4 known murders.
Huh. It's just so curious, though, why he would volunteer information about 4 of them. And especially if he's wanting attention, why wouldn't he just fess up to all of them if there's more?
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. Because while there's so much evidence to say or support that there are more victims, I feel the exact same way as you. That if he so willingly gave up 4, why wouldn't he just tell them about the rest?
Right. Especially if he's wanting attention. Even texting that shirtless picture with blood on his hands. It's all a cry for attention.
I think so. And so why wouldn't he tell them of more?
Right. And even looking up facts about being a serial killer means he was wanting that status. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for status, you're going to want to put as many names on your docket as possible.
Yeah. But to date, he hasn't told them of any more.
And it is very suspicious that he would be looking up garbage pickup times if he didn't have something to throw in there that he didn't want anyone to find.
Mm-hmm. The evidence makes it appear that there are definitely more victims.
Unless he was planning to murder other women and it didn't happen the way he had planned.
But that wouldn't have been his pattern. The pattern with the other 4 women was that he looked up the garbage truck schedules when he was ready to throw them out.
True, after he had already murdered them.
Yeah.
Huh, that is very curious.
It is. And like you said, because this is such a recent case, there might be further developments.
We'll have to keep you guys posted if more comes out. Because I have a feeling some probably will.
Yeah, it makes me wonder. One of the things that police discovered on his computer was that Jeremy had also started to do internet searches about the Bear Clan Patrol in the beginning of May. Bear Clan Patrol is a volunteer safety group that works in the north end of Winnipeg. The group describes itself as a community of people working with the Aboriginal community to provide personal security in the inner city in a non-threatening, non-violent, and supportive way. And this made me wonder if this was where he was picking victims from.
Oh my. He could have been.
Watching this group and seeing who they were supporting, the same way that he used the shelters.
Right. It's an unnerving thought.
Mm-hmm. Using the statements provided by Jeremy that he had put Rebecca's torso in a big brown bin near the Tony and Midas stores, police were able to locate the rest of Rebecca's remains at the Brady Road landfill on June 15th. It was double wrapped, just as Jeremy said it would be. This discovery was made possible because the garbage truck that had picked up Rebecca's remains had been equipped with GPS and video technology. They had been able to narrow it down to a relatively small area to search. It was still a huge task to go through the landfill site, but they were able to find her remains.
That's actually pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. I had no idea that there would be GPS and video on a garbage truck.
It makes so much sense to me that there is after researching this case.
Fantastic.
Unfortunately, the remains of the other 3 women have still not been recovered. Police have a strong suspicion based on the garbage truck schedules around the times of their death that Morgan and Marcedes' bodies were most likely taken to the Prairie Green landfill site on May 16th.
But they couldn't look at the GPS and video for May 16th for those garbage trucks?
No, they don't have them.
Oh, is it one of those things where it erases after a certain amount of time?
These ones just weren't equipped with it.
Okay, dang.
It was so sad that by the time that police had Jeremy's confession and they had put all the pieces together and figured out the possible location of these 2 women's bodies, An additional 10,077 loads of compacted garbage had been deposited in the general area where their bodies had been placed.
Oh.
This amount of garbage translates to about 3 acres of 40 feet high garbage to sift through.
No way.
Yeah.
Virtually impossible.
Right. And unfortunately, there is no indication where Buffalo Woman's remains are. The recovery of the victims' remains has brought on a considerable amount of controversy, not just in Manitoba, but across the country. Initially, it was decided that the bodies would not be recovered. This enraged the Indigenous communities because they felt like, again, Indigenous women were being disrespected and forgotten. They were being treated like garbage. People also argued that this would set a precedence to other would-be killers, telling them that a landfill is a place that would hide evidence efficiently.
Right.
The battle over the recovery has become very politicized and has been the subject of very large feasibility studies. And feasibility studies aren't cheap.
No, they should have just went and looked for the women. It would have cost probably the same.
Well, that's not what the studies say. The studies cost over $700,000, but the cost to find the women, they reported to be much, much higher. The most practical approach, according to the studies, would begin with an excavator moving the material to a truck, which would then take it to a temporary building constructed on site. There, the material could be mechanically separated by size and fed into a series of conveyor belts. Metal objects would be removed by magnets, and then a team of technicians outfitted in fully protective equipment due to the toxic chemicals, asbestos, and other hazards would spend shifts searching through the material as it moved slowly past them. This is similar to the approach used on the Picton farm, and another in 2011 in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. That search took 3 months and cost $1 million. The Winnipeg search will be a considerably harder search. It's a much bigger area, and most significantly, unlike other landfills, the Prairie Green landfill accepts asbestos, a material that can cause cancer when ingested. 12 tons of asbestos was deposited in the sections or cells of interest after May 16th. And it's believed to be covering the bodies of Marcedes and Morgan.
Oh my goodness, that's messy.
Mm-hmm.
They should have stopped any garbage, and they should have just been looked for right at the beginning.
Well, they did stop any garbage from being dumped there as soon as police kind of put it all together. That was on June 20th. But by then, there was already 12 tons of asbestos, plus all the other garbage already dumped on top.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, if that was one of the political leaders' wives or daughters, would it be the same decision? I'm thinking it wouldn't. And like you said, intentional or not, that sends a very loud message.
It does. One of the biggest concerns, though, about looking for the remains is that excavating the area could cause the bags that contain asbestos to break and for it to become airborne. So it would be a huge hazard to those searching. Digging would require the ground to be misted constantly to keep down any particles that would fill the air, and workers would require full protective gear at all times.
Could they be protected from it if they were in the right gear?
Yeah, asbestos can be removed safely, but the first estimate of how much it would cost to dig through the dump site was between 84 to 184 million.
Wow.
Yeah. A second feasibility study was done. It came back a little bit more economical, around the $90 million mark.
So not up to 180 million.
That's right. To put that in perspective, though, 90 million is 6 times what the government of Manitoba proposes to spend on Indigenous economic development in the 2024-25 year. And it's almost a fifth of what it plans to spend on infrastructure for the whole province. So it's not a little sum of money.
No, it isn't. But I feel pretty torn about that.
I know. I am firmly on the fence with this one. It's a sizable cost to search, and the success rates are pretty slim. So initially, the government refused to undertake the project. But the newly elected political party ran on the platform of the search going forward, and they have lobbied both the provincial and federal government to commit $20 million each to the project. The search will begin this fall, with many believing that other bodies will also be found.
Good. I am actually glad that that search is being conducted. Because honestly, like I said, you take any of those top political leaders, if that was their daughter who could have possibly been in there, wouldn't have even blinked.
Yes, I think so. Where I was sitting on the fence was, that is so much money, But if it was my daughter, I would want her found.
Well, and our country has spent money way more frivolously than that.
Exactly. But arguments over this recovery did get very, very heated, and they're still very heated. On December 1st, 2022, Jeremy was charged with the additional 3 counts of first-degree murder. Those charges came shortly after Dirtbag Jeremy started changing his story about why he had murdered. During his initial interview with police, after claiming to be a nice guy and not wanting to hurt people, he was very comfortable confessing to murdering 4 people. He told police that his victims and all of his relationships that he chose to be in were with indigenous women, despite his beliefs in white supremacy. That was because he felt that they were accepting of him and that they were often meek and subservient. He said that he felt like, quote, a lion with prey in its mouth, and admits that he probably wouldn't have stopped killing if he wasn't caught.
I don't think he would have.
No, I don't think he would either. During the first interview, he claims, quote, I believe that God raises some people up for the sole purpose of destruction. And I believe now, like more conclusively, that this is why I was put here, and this is the reason it was. For them, that it was their time. Yes, it was my decision. It's not something that God willed or decided something. That I decided because I believe that doing this, I mean, it's, like obvious it causes death, but I think that extreme desperate measures need to be taken for the survival of my people. He went on to say that, quote, I believe that this is something that God called me to do. But I started to kind of rationalize more and realize that it wasn't God calling me directly to do that because God, wouldn't ask me to kill anyone. That goes against God's very nature. But it was something that I decided to do because I thought that it was right.
That's abhorrent.
Mm-hmm.
The mere fact that he is saying that God put these women on the earth as my prey, it's disgusting. And to me, it makes it feel like the government needs to send a very clear message here. What if the government started putting extra resources into looking for indigenous women and victims and went really hard at getting justice for these women in our country?
Mm-hmm.
It would stop a lot of people like Jeremy from believing that they are natural prey because that's how they're being treated.
It's so sad.
It breaks my heart and fuels anger inside of me. Like, I'm almost going to cry. I'm so mad that these women are treated that way.
Yep. I don't have words for it.
No, me either. Because you're a woman and your skin's a certain color. You were born into a certain nationality.
That now you can just be used like that.
Yeah. It's so wicked.
Mm-hmm.
So evil.
And that's what he is. Just evil.
Yeah. Slap God's name out of his mouth. To even bring God into that.
Well, that's how he's justifying himself. Because during this confession, he has no problem taking responsibility for his actions. He's proud to claim them. He's like, yeah, I did them, and this is why. That would change in the months following his arrest after Jeremy met with his lawyers. With so much evidence along with the fully admissible recorded confession, his defense team knew the only feasible defense that they could make was to plead not criminally responsible.
Yeah.
It's the only available option.
Oh, yeah. His goose was cooked.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
So Jeremy admitted that he had killed each of the 4 women, but that he had been compelled to do so and unable to control himself at the time of the murders. After a lengthy debate, Jeremy's choice to have a judge-only trial was granted, and the trial began on May 8th, 2024. And they got down to arguing about the not criminally responsible defense. Jeremy hung everything on this defense, and his defense had to go all the way to the UK to find a doctor that would testify that he wasn't criminally responsible.
No one in Canada would testify that he was criminally insane?
No one in North America.
Oh, yeah, that's saying something, Melissa.
Mm-hmm. But they did find one doctor. Dr. Shohom Das was brought in on this case, his first Canadian case ever, as a consultant forensic psychiatrist. In the UK, he's been practicing since 2014. One of his bios reads, quote, Dr. Shohom Das is an NHS doctor, consultant, forensic psychiatrist, and YouTuber, presenter, and author who lives and works in London. Soholm has made several media appearances on radio and television programs, including guesting on numerous podcasts from comedy to true crime. He's even done several dozen stand-up gigs.
Oh, come here so I can punch you right in the face.
Yeah.
He's just looking for his 5 minutes of fame.
Yes, I believe he is. He runs a YouTube channel that covers content addressing mental health, public education, and true crime entertainment. His credibility was called into question a lot during the trial, especially when the Crown showed the judge the video that ended with Dr. Das telling his audience, quote, "Don't kill anybody, but if you do, don't tell anybody."
What?
Yes.
And this is who they're thinking is going to be a great witness to bring in.
Well, it's the only one they can find.
In the world.
Yes.
Because, okay, you guys, if you don't know, North America is very large and we have a lot of psychologists. If you can't find one, then, okay, you're done. Just give up. It's obviously not true.
It was almost humorous to read this judge's breakdown of this doctor's professionalism. He actually went out and commented on the case to the Globe and Mail before the sentencing was complete.
No way.
Yeah, he's very, very unprofessional.
Where did he get his license? A Cracker Jack box?
In the UK, he's totally certified. He practices.
Wow.
Despite his unprofessionalism, his opinions were shared with the court. After meeting with Jeremy twice for about 3 hours total between September 12th, 2022 and April 22nd, 2004, and reading through his past medical history and watching his recorded confession, Dr. Das came to the conclusion that Jeremy was not criminally responsible. He believed Jeremy had been compelled to murder by his hallucinations and delusions that were brought on by schizophrenia. That his ideas about God directing him were more than just beliefs that he held. They compelled him to act. He also said that the necrophilia was the result of hallucinations as well. He believed and testified that Jeremy had been incapable of knowing his actions were wrong because he was in a delusional state.
No, Jeremy himself admitted that he wanted to have sex with lifeless women, even making his wife act that way.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't hallucinating.
No. It was not a popular diagnosis, and it was completely ripped apart by the much more seasoned psychiatrist testifying for the prosecution.
Yeah. You could take an unseasoned psychologist for the prosecution, and they could have proven this man wrong.
It was crazy.
In 3 hours? You fly all across the pond and spend 3 hours with him?
Oh, he didn't fly. They just did video conferencing.
He didn't even come here?
No.
Okay, this is almost a joke. Like they're pranking us, right?
He is a stand-up comedian, so maybe. I feel bad because he's actually a professional, but...
You don't even come here and meet this guy in person. You video chat with him.
And then he took everybody's statements because remember, Aaron did say that he acted very bizarrely. He seemed like he had these 3 different personalities. And so he's taking everybody's information and he's meshing it into pretty much what the defense wants.
Right. And I'm not debating that he could have some mental health illness, but I don't believe for 1 second that he was not aware of his actions. He premeditated them.
Mm-hmm. There were so many things that he did that prove that he knew what he was doing was wrong.
100%.
Yeah. Dr. Gary Chemowitz pointed out of all the doctors that had seen Jeremy during his adolescent and adult life, none had ever diagnosed him with schizophrenia, and that since being incarcerated, he has had no concerns with his mental health and required no treatment.
There you go. That speaks volumes.
Mm-hmm. He told the judge, quote, taking into consideration the accused's medical history and experiences with both social services and the criminal justice system, it is unlikely that the accused's illness, if it was schizophrenia, would have gone undetected for decades.
Yeah.
During his interactions with Jeremy, double the time that Dr. Das assessed him for, he found Jeremy to be, quote, clear, thoughtful, and measured. At no point did he show any overt signs of any mental disorder. He did not believe that Jeremy had any major psychotic disorder associated with psychosis, a substance use disorder, or an antisocial personality disorder. He pointed out that during his statements to police, Jeremy appeared to remain, quote, clear and consistent with the motive inherent in his communications pre-offense and at times post-offense, before he started to change his story.
Right.
The prosecution's doctor proposed another diagnosis that Dr. Das had dismissed. homicidal necrophilia. He believed that Jeremy's soft-spoken, outwardly gentle and thoughtful traits was used to disarm potential victims, and that while his thought processes might have been altered by drugs, that he was not past knowing right from wrong, that he purposely preyed on weak and vulnerable women in order to satisfy his own morbid sexual fantasies. He pretty much said that all of Jeremy's claims of God and missions was his own weak attempt to justify his urges and actions, and that Jeremy had purposely misled Dr. Das, which I thought was so ironic because Dr. Das is a doctor that has a YouTube video on how to fake mental illnesses.
Dr. Das, you might want to go watch your video. Honey, you need to write down a few notes from that one.
Oh. In the video, listed as part of a series on faking mental illness, Dr. Das explains a number of methods he uses and discrepancies he watches to determine whether someone is lying about having a mental disorder. In the video, he says, quote, "I've just realized that I've kind of given away cheat codes for faking mental illness." "Oh, well," he says, at one point shrugging.
You can only laugh because that's so ridiculous, honestly.
I just could not get over this professional.
Yeah.
It was wild.
But I think he just wanted to so badly be the hero in all of this that he just looked past it.
Mm-hmm. He found evidence that supported his conclusion.
And I'm going to be the hero in this case.
Yeah. Could you imagine a jury sitting on this case listening to these two professionals and having to decide which one's more credible?
Oh, it was smart not to do a jury in the first place. But honestly, if I was a jury member and I knew that no one in North America would come and testify for the defense, that would discredit whatever this other psychologist was going to say right from the start, in my eyes.
Yeah. Very clearly, he had been paid for his opinion.
Yeah.
The final nail in Jeremy's not criminally responsible defense was the letters that he wrote to another female inmate. Between January 4th, 2023 and April 27th, 2003, Jeremy outlined how he was using the not criminally responsible defense to get off of murder charges. These letters had the opposite effect that he wanted. They showed that he was organized, articulate, and calculating. They showed that he was fully aware of how to work the system.
And that he was dumb enough to write it in a letter that was going to be staying in the prison.
Yeah, in one of the letters, he actually comments about, "Oh, they're probably reading these, but if they don't, then I'm going to get away with murder."
I hope they forwarded those to Dr. Das. I was the prosecutor. I would have been like, "Can I get copies of those, please? I know someone who needs to see them." He's literally writing about doing that.
And he's asking for this other inmate's suggestions and bragging to her about it. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, no fence sitting on this part either.
No. Not shockingly, the judge ruled guilty on all 4 counts of first-degree murder, saying, quote, "In my opinion, the weight of all the mental health and other contacts, his own statements, in digital print, and his other pre-offense actions and behaviors, all point to a conspiracy-laden, racist man with significant personality problems and addictions, along with homicidal necrophilia, who committed a series of racially motivated murders and necrophilic acts. I am not left with a reasonable doubt. Indeed, after having considered the totality of the evidence adduced at trial, and the effect of that evidence, the sum total of it, I am satisfied that the Crown has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused has the requisite state of mind and intent for murder when the accused killed Buffalo Woman, Morgan Harris, Marcedes Myran, and Rebecca Contois. Irrespective of the post-mortem timing of the accused's sexual acts towards his victims, I find that each of the murders was sexually motivated and carried out, at least in part, for the purpose of facilitating sexual acts against deceased victims." At the pronouncement of this verdict, many cheered, but many held the statement too of Mercedes' grandmother, Donna Bartlett, when she said, quote, "He got convicted of murder, and I'm glad for that. I really am. Now the next step is to bring my girl home."
Absolutely. They need to.
Yeah, I think they do.
Nobody's daughter should be left in a landfill.
No. On August 28th, Chief Justice Glenn Joyal handed down the mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole for all 4 women's murders. Due to rulings by the Supreme Court of Canada, these life sentences must be served concurrently rather than consecutively. When the judge asked if Jeremy had anything to say, he simply said, quote, "Nope." And then he refused to stand during the sentencing.
Oh.
He ignored all 3 commands.
Break his knees. So then he has an excuse not to be standing. And just nope. Like, I don't care.
He clearly does not care. While declaring the sentence, the judge stared Jeremy down and said, quote, "Make no mistake, Mr. Skibicki. Because of the current state of the law, the only available sentence that I can impose today will regrettably not adequately reflect the gravity of these offenses." From Milner Ridge Correctional Center, 90 kilometers east of Winnipeg, Jeremy, now 37, proudly declares that he is a gentleman who does not like hurting people, and that he sleeps well in jail and is generally untroubled by feelings of guilt.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insult to injury.
Mm-hmm. And that is the case of the cruel and barbaric predator, the dirtbag Jeremy Anthony Michael Skibicki.
Let's hope he doesn't survive prison.
Oh. I think that we will still hear more about him.
I think so too.
Mm-hmm.
But 100%, he is a man who should never be let back out into society.
No. Unfortunately, he will be eligible for parole in 25 years.
And won't be that old. He could still have decades of wreaking havoc in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Melissa. That was quite the case. But these are important cases for us to be talking about.
There is so many things to unpack with this case. And when excavation starts in the fall, I hope it goes well and that they are able to bring these women's remains home to their families.
I hope so too. Well, thank you again, listeners, for joining us this week. This wasn't an easy case to listen to,
but we're happy that we get to discuss it with you.
If you have any information about any of the women who could have been in contact with Jeremy, please let police know. We will keep you updated on any developments in this case.
And we'll also be back with you next week when Christy has another case.
And until then,
see ya.
Bye. Hey, testing again.
Hey, hopefully I'm not overpowering anymore. It's a lot of Melissa.
We like a lot of Melissa. I didn't even notice.
Didn't I?
Sorry, my brain. No, you probably did.
Okay. Case.
We're recording at night, you guys, so who knows what we're going to get.
Didn't I say that?
Try.
Chacosipia. Sipai. Is that what it sounded like?
Sure.
I can't even say it. Oh, man. Jeremy.
You can call him Jeremy.
Yeah, I know.
He is a giant germ.
So gross.
You're a germ on this planet.
Oh. Usually I feel sorry for them, but this guy was like, no, you're a dirtbag through and through. Like, I couldn't even get to the second paragraph before I was like, he's a dirtbag. I just need you to know he's a dirtbag. Or a relative's place. I just want to talk with a lisp today.
Sexy.
Unfortunately, it didn't stop Jeremy.
He's germy. Your brain is just like, ew.
He is so gross that he's germy to me. An adult life that Jeremy. Oh my goodness. That's his name from now on, okay?
Let's just call him Jeremy. Can you imagine? We're giving him a nickname. Yeah. It's Jeremy.
They found that Jeremy.
He graduated from Jeremy to
I know, he's a German. This is so disgusting.
I hate this guy. But you can't be laughing.
Oh, this is why we don't record at night. We get all giddy. Okay.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.